So today we learn how to add text arrays to the ActionSript 3 slideshow. And let me first show you the difference. And we can do that by reviewing and looking at the first version that we did. Okay, so let me go ahead and go to Control, Test Movie. And if you recall, you just click on each of the buttons, and I showed you how to customize the buttons so that they were little icons or thumbnails of the images that the viewer would see. And if you want, you could always put text underneath or on top that would indicate to the viewer what's there. Okay. The next step now is to add a dynamic text box below so that when we load these images, it also loads a description of what the image is. Now, the downside to this, and this is sort of the problem, I don't want to call it a problem, but a challenge that you're facing with your website, Piper, is that you want to use text that's a little bit, I don't know, more dynamic, that's illustrative, that's has a flair to it. For captions, you can't. Not if you're going to use dynamic text. No way, Jose. You can't. You know, just in Flash you probably could, but in HTML you can't. Yeah, the only way you can, and this will be true when we go to Dreamweaver 2, when you want to get elaborate with your text, is that it's best to embed it in your image then, if that's the case, because then it becomes an image. It's no longer editable text. That's the plus side. Then you can use whatever font you want. The downside is that if you have to edit the image, or you change if you want to change the description, you got to go back and edit the original image. Okay, and replace it. So there's that problem. So now if we compare, looks identical except for this little box down below. Everybody see that? And when I click on it, you'll notice in the properties panel that it's dynamic text. We've been using static text up to this point, so we're going to use a dynamic text box. To create a dynamic text box is quite simple. You simply select the text tool, make sure that dynamic text is selected, click and drag, and size it however you wish. Use guidelines, however, and as soon as you click back on the direct selection tool, you get the little blue bounding box that again lets you resize it, and as soon as you deselect, you see the little dotted outline. That's your dynamic text box. The next step, similar to what we had done before, remember with the instances of the buttons, so that the ActionSript pertained to that instance as well as the loader, we had to name the instance of the movie clips, the instance of the buttons. That's what we do for the dynamic text box as well. You can name it whatever you want, but remember the rules for naming for the web apply here. Notice that they're using Camelback in here, or you have to start with a lowercase. If you do use uppercase, it's stuck somewhere in the middle there. An alternative would be, if you wanted a space between my text, you have to use an underscore, not a hyphen, but an underscore, and then you can do that. So it reads as two separate words, but it's actually, there is a character there that takes up that space. You can't have an empty space. You can't start with a numeral. You can't use special characters. You can't, all those goodies. The same when the very beginning of the semester, and I was talking about naming your files, the same is true for this. Okay? So that's the next thing. Once you've already finished your layout, you've made this work, now you create a dynamic text box, select it, and you name it here in your properties, so that when you apply it to the ActionSript, it will, because you could have multiple dynamic text boxes on your page, and when you click on a different button, it would insert the text into whichever box you want. It has to know which one it's supposed to put it into, because it's an instance of that particular box. So let's go ahead and test this. Do control test movie, and we'll see how this is different. It's not that different. Click here, but notice down here, this is Las Vegas. Click here, Golden Nugget. Now, where did that text come from? It's in the actionSript. You put it in the actionSript. And if we come back now and we look at our actionSript for this, let me put this back down here now. Let's put this up here. Actually, I didn't want to attach that, and I did. Oh, come on. Oh, no, 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 don't do that. Still there. Let me drag this over here then. You know, okay, I don't know what I'm doing here. Let's go to Window and Workspace, and we're going to go to Default. There we go. And that fixed that. Now let's come back to Actions, and I want to make sure that I select the actions here. And now it's done a little bit differently. I suppose we should go back to the other again and look at the actionSript in here. And it is I don't know that it's more complex to add the array, but you do have to add more. Okay. Here we just had actionSript for each of the buttons and the loader, which was the movie clip here, to be able to put specific images in each of in that same loader, right? Every time you clicked on one of these buttons, and I showed you how to add one, if you want to add multiple, add additional images, to place the image associated with this button inside this movie clip, this loader. So this is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to change. And we're going to change the way this is done as well. Instead of having under each one of these, button 2, button 3, and having the name of the slide under each of these, we're going to put them all in just 2 places at the top. So if you want to edit your slideshow and you want to edit the text, you don't have to go under each one of these and change it. It will be in a little place at the top, and that's by using an array. So if I switch here, let's watch and see how it changes. Okie doke. Let me stretch this out a little bit so you can see. It looks similar to the rest of what we had before, but now we have these empty containers, and there's 2 empty containers. One that we used before was the loader. That was the movie clip into which we placed the image. That is now called my array. And you'll notice inside my array and notice the types of brackets, they're square brackets, that inside that array, the name of each is where the name of each of those slides are. So instead of under each of these, remember how the names were under each of these? It's just in a row here, and they don't have to be in a row. One of the things that you have to remember, though, with arrays, and we get down here in a minute, is that your array, and for button 1, doesn't start with array 1, it starts with array 0. You start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you have 6 slides, it starts with 0. So the last number down here is 5. 0, okay? That's important. We also have another variable. Variables are nothing more than containers. And that's what the dynamic text box is that we created. It's a container. And you'll notice in here, and you'll notice that each of these descriptions, you can put in whatever you want, and this can change. For example, let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and change it. This is, or this was my first trip to Las Vegas. It has to end in quotes, not finger quotes, but actual quotes. But I'm using finger quotes to show you. Okay? And then each one is separated by a comma. And they're in order. And now notice what we do for each of these. Now we have button 1, and we, just as we did before, you add event listener. It's a mouse event on click, but over here we have loader 1. The function now is a loader event, same before, but now just notice below here it says my loader.source equals my array. Which array? It's the first one. It's up here, the first one is road trip 1. So if it's the first in the array, it's 0. And the same applies for the description. And for each consecutive button, you apply the same action script. The action script is actually simplified now. But just as we had before, we had loader 1, loader function loader 1. Now we have loader 2, function loader 2, same event. But now we have my loader source is my array 1. My text.text equals description 1. So for each one down, we're just adding another number, another number, another number for as many slides as we have. So now let's go back here. Now that I changed that description, and let's come back here. Let's reduce the size of this a bit, and let's test it and see what happens. So I'm going to go to Control, Test Movie. And now when I click here, this is my first trip to Vegas. So it does make it easier to edit, especially in this case, descriptions. If you don't like the style of text, you're kind of sunk. Because this, I mean, there is much more flexibility with Flash, however. That in many instances, especially with static text, it will convert the text to outlines. So you don't have to worry the way you do with HTML about the fonts that you use.
So you don't have to put the actual text in the thing. You just have to put it.
No, you just put it in the action script, and it knows when you, by adding that little additional piece of action script, to put that text from that array inside that box. Yeah.
What about the naming protocol on the images? It starts with a capital R instead of the usual naming protocol.
That's a good question, and because I wasn't the designer of this, I wouldn't have done that. And I'm not sure it works, but I'm not sure why it works. There's always one person that would ask a question that I don't. I wouldn't do that. Does everybody understand the question? If I go back and I look at this, it's one thing to name well, even so, the way he's named the images, I wouldn't do that. I would have started road trip with a lowercase r. And why he did that, I don't know, and it does work. Maybe because, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I just get so, because there's always that instance where you try that and it doesn't like it, and then it doesn't work. And I don't know all of this stuff well enough to know these exceptions. So I play it safe, and I name everything using the protocol or that I've established.
It could be because it's in Flash and an action script.
But even in Flash, when you name an instance, it follows that protocol. So in here, why wouldn't it be the same? I don't know. Well, yeah, I don't know, because I know if you were to take these same JPEGs with this name and put it in Dreamweaver and upload it, it wouldn't work. Just pull it out, upload it in Dreamweaver. They wouldn't work because it wouldn't allow you to load the image simply because you've started the name of your image with a capital, an uppercase letter. Does that make sense to everybody? Why it works in Flash, I don't know. Because there are some instances where the protocol, you have to adhere to that naming system that I've described. And in this particular case, he's deviated from it, and it still works. So I don't know. Let's go back again, because there's a few more things that I need to show you. So let's select again, and let's look at the properties panel a little bit more. Aside from adding dynamic text, one of the things that he's done too, because what if you want a really long description? You have your a choice. You have, well, actually 3 choices here. You can use single line, so it has to stay on a single line. And you'll notice in forms, oftentimes that's the way it is. When you fill out a form and you have input text, it's restricted to a single line. You can't use multiples. You could do that, but in this case, it gives you a little bit more flexibility depending on the size of the text box you create. So multi-line now is selected, so you can create quite a string, quite a lengthy description if you want that will place it in there.
What about if multi-line says no wrap?
I wouldn't do that. Why it's there, I don't know, because then if it's multi-line but no wrap, then it doesn't, in this particular instance, it wouldn't make sense. Does everybody understand that? When you have multi-lines, when it gets to the end of the box, it automatically wraps. So I don't know when you would use that. Under the fonts, he was also very careful, and he just selected of the basic groups a simple sans serif typeface. If you switch to serif and we do it again, it's going to load a generic typeface. And it will depend on what, the typeface will depend on what the end user's computer has. And that's one of the things I know for the longest time has really irks designers who love type about the web. Because what you have to do, and it pertains to designing for the lowest common denominator, there are just a handful of fonts that are available on everybody's computer, that are installed when you buy it. And even that, if I were to select Helvetica on my computer, Helvetica is a beautiful typeface. You know, Swiss, modern, elegantly designed, been used, overused forever. And there's another one that's very similar to it, because you can't, you cannot copyright typeface design. So years ago, there was a knockoff called Helios. And it's very similar to Helvetica, but it's not quite the same. And most of the time, you wouldn't notice any difference. Huh?
What about the Microsoft?
Arial was very similar in that regard, yeah. They look very similar to Helvetica, but Helvetica is the one. Well, if you put in Helvetica, or if you select, let's say, just sans serif, on your computer, if that's what you have as your default sans serif typeface, it will put in Helvetica. But on somebody else's who owns a PC, or it will put in Helios or Arial. So there will be those slight variations, and the same will be true for those. So you have to allow that flexibility, and that's the way it goes. But Piper, for example, when we were just discovered, there's, for your heads, your subheads, you want something that's a little bit more illustrative, a little bit more elegant than just the basic food groups. Then in that case, you have to put an image of text, and it makes it a little bit more work for you to design and to edit later on. You have to go back and you have to substitute with another image.
So you go into Photoshop and create it?
You go into Photoshop and you create it, and you have to know the size, and you have to have a background, or if it's going to be a PNG file with a transparent background, you have to know what background color that you're using for your web page, so that for the curved ones that you have a matte color, and it's going to match so that you don't see the jaggies and all that good stuff. It's a lot of work. Or you just make a little rectangle, and the background of the text matches whatever background color you're using on your page, and you put that in there. So it does take a bit of work. But, you know, for heads, subheads, key words like that, it is worthwhile. And what we will discover too, or what you'll discover too when we get to Dreamweaver, one of the things that you'll have to do to make it work, especially if people who view your site or sight impaired, that you're going to have to use alt tags so that when the reader that they use reads the website to them, you know, mechanically, that when it reaches that image, it will give them a description of what this is. And that will be whatever it is that's in your alt tag. You know, picture of cheetah.
Right.
You know,
Doesn't that also work as far as embedding the metadata so that Google can search when somebody says cheetah?
that will help too. But the principal reason why it was initiated is for people, and if supposedly, not supposedly, but when I do stuff for school here, I'm supposed to do everything that's Bobby compliant. That's what it used to be called. That anybody who's seeing impaired, whatever, you know, anybody who has the slowest computer, no monitor, whatever, can get the information from my website. And to be 100% Bobby compliant is near impossible. But in Dreamweaver, there is a feature that will check, and it will let you know how compliant your pages are. And you'll discover, in particular with yours, how little compliant, you know, almost no compliant.
No compliance.
But for the people who are going to view your website, it doesn't matter. You know, you're only interested in targeting a very narrow group of people. And that's what's for now, but that's what's important. But then you may later on have to make one that's not quite as elegant so that everybody can view it. You know, that's the trade-off. I mean, the bottom line is that you could have a website that's all text, and that would be available to anybody on anything. And that's actually how the internet started, really, and it was just all text-based. It wasn't intended for images. It wasn't intended when they developed it to do what we're doing with it. So it's really not, the way you build websites now, I think, is not all that elegant compared to desktop publishing and that sort of thing. Yeah.
At 72 dpi, in terms of display type, it's not an issue. If you
No, because it's meant to be viewed on the monitor. As soon as you print it, it's not going to look that great.
Yeah, and then for reading scientists, let's say on the monitor.
It actually works pretty well. Yeah.
Not the
It doesn't. It's not a problem. Because everything that you view on your monitor, even if you have an image that's 300 pixels per inch, you're still only viewing it at 72 pixels per inch.
But if it's text and if it's done on HTML, when it prints, it actually prints sharper than the images because, you know, it's mathematically generated.
Right.
Instead of being pixelated.
Correct. That's true.
So that's why a lot of people use
Well, but
HTML.
true. But then there's alternatives, and we'll get to that in Dreamweaver too. That, for example, let's say you want to put your resume and make it available for people online. Well, why not create it in your favorite desktop publishing program and save it as a PDF file? Put that PDF file in your root folder. And again, I'm moving ahead a couple weeks here now. And then make a link on your website to that file. So, and they don't know what they're getting. You know, it says for printable version, click here. And all they're doing when they click there is clicking on that a link to that PDF file in your root folder, and it automatically opens up in Acrobat Reader on your computer, and it downloads it, and then you print it out. So that's the workaround to that I see, that when you want printable versions, that's a better choice, a better way to go.
When does one go to a vector-based text? When is that decision reached?
You never really have vector-based text. It's always converted to a bitmap, or it's all bitmap on the web. It's all they're all images basically, unless it's editable text, and then it's most of everything is switched to TrueType now, so it's basically outlines which are scalable, and that's defined by mathematics.
Sometimes when you're in a web page and you browse and you change your font on your browser, it's the
Mhm.
largest font that you can read, especially for people who cannot read like
Right.
points. But if you in your browser you make it like 12, then it automatically generates that 12 when you print it out also. So which means
Right,
on
but that
HTML,
the only way that can happen, I believe, is now by using TrueType. That works. And now I think all computers use TrueType as opposed to, I can't think, anyway. That happened the other day. It keeps crashing on me. Something is screwed up on my, let me, okay. I have to go back again. We'll find Firefox because it's not opening on my computer. That's weird. I must have corrected it the other day when I was trying to install some software in here. I think also this is what you mean too. Again, I'm going to use, again, not that it's the perfect choice. Okay. Hold on here. I'm going to go to, let's just go to YKMart for a minute. Whoops. And let's say for yourself that this is just too small. If I click the Command plus, wait a minute, no. What is it? Control plus? Huh?
Command plus here moves other. Command plus it makes it bigger on my computer.
Let me just, wait a minute, Shift plus.
Command plus.
Why isn't it working? View, text size. Oh, yeah, it's not working on my computer. Increase. There we go. Command plus. There we go. So I can make this as big as I want. It makes a mess of my website. And it's right because this is
Bringing the text up, but not the image.
right. So that is doable. And then you can make it illegible the other way too. Okay. Now with the, but okay, point being that this is the editable text. And I've chosen Verdana. I like Verdana as a sans serif typeface for the web. It's clean. I'm partial to it. But images don't increase in size. They're fixed. So if you choose to use images on your website for headlines, subheads, that sort of thing, then you need to be careful because it is what it is. You know, people can enlarge it and see it larger on the web.
That'll probably be larger to begin with, since it's really only going to be the title and,
Yeah. Okay.
not the editable.
Okay. Back to the gallery text array. Again, I have the file available for you. All right. Some of you were able to copy the entire group of files. And again, just copy the ActionScript, plop it in there, compare. And if you need to add, add as we did before. It's very simple by adding, the loader number and changing it, and you're basically done with it. But that's how you do it. I was going to add a couple more things. Yeah, he used, and that would be on the safe side. He did that intentionally. Just using serif or sans serif. Now I changed it to serif to show you what happens. So if I change it back again, notice it's changed to serif typeface. Now that's an advantage too. If you want to later on change it, you go, instead of going back and having to copy, paste, and edit all individual ones, it doesn't. Just by changing that one little feature inside that text box, it changes everything now to serif typeface. Now, one of my bias is that now that I have bifocals and they're the blended ones, they're kind of hard to focus sometimes. You know, I have to do that. And for myself, you know, staring at monitors all day, I find that, and it's just my personal preference, that on the web I find serif typeface, especially for body copy, very hard to read. That's just, but now in print, that's a different ball of wax, that's different altogether. Typically, serif typefaces are more legible. I mean, that's why you see in the LA Times and newspapers and magazines, the bulk of them use, I mean, Times Roman, or they use, you know, an elegant serif typeface. And because it does add to legibility when you're reading large blocks of text. But I find just the opposite be true, that even with a computer mathematically generated text online, because you're only viewing it 72 pixels per inch, those serifs tend to break up and not be as legible. So I shy away from that on the web. Anything that, unless it's large enough, subhead category or headline, so that it's really distinct and visible. Okay? That was all I wanted to add today, and that's it. Michelle, are you having any better luck with the template? No? Okay. Okay, well, we can try that today. No.
But you can open it in CS4.
Sure, you can open it in CS4, but it should work just fine, because this is using actionSript 3 too. So it will be fine. Uh-huh. Huh? Yeah, you can get a copy of all of this. We'll put it on your flash drive or try to log in there, and it should be in there. If you downloaded that whole folder before, it should be in there. It will be arrays. Let me show you where it's at in my public folder. Look in Miller, and when you go into the public folder, you'll have access to all of these. If you go to Flash Boot Camp, and then you look at source files, and you look at actionSript 4, part 4, and you look in the gallery folder, you look in here, those two files should be in here. You'll see it's text arrays flash. That's the one. So all of this is complete for that. For those two examples, this will give you everything that you need. All the actionSript and everything. Okie doke.